One of the largest economies in the world is United Kingdom. Recent news that UK is slapped into recession. Its UK economy fell into recession last 2023, plus things you should know in simplest manner about recession. At the Trading Kids 2024, your real life access in global markets and macroeconomics. Before we talk about recessions, I think it is important to discuss first what is an economic cycle. Knowing an economic cycle would understand recession better. What is an economic cycle? The economic cycle is the fluctuating state of an economy from periods of economic expansion and contraction. It is usually measured by the gross domestic products of a country or region. Other economic factors such as employment rates, consumer spending, and interest rates can also be used to determine the stage of the economic cycle. Understanding the economic period can help investors and businesses determine when to make investment and when to pull their money out, as each cycle impacts stocks and bonds as well as profit and corporate earnings. The major basis for economic cycle is a GDP. Okay, what is GDP? GDP is the total monetary or market value of all finished goods and services produced within a country's borders during a specific time period. It serves as a comprehensive scorecard for a country's economic health. The GDP growth is the percentage increase in GDP from quarter to quarter, and it changes as the economy moves through the business cycle. If the growth cycle is negative, the economy contracts and it signals a recession. If it contracts for years, that's a depression. If the growth rate is too high, it creates inflation. So there are types of GDP measurement such as real GDP, GDP per capita, and GDP growth. So when it comes of knowing recessions, we are particularly to GDP growth. Okay, stages of economic cycle. Number one, expansion. The first stage in the business cycle is expansion. In this stage, there is an increase in positive economic indicators such as employment, income, output, wages, profits, demand, and supply of goods and services. Debtors are generally paying their debts on time, the velocity of the money supply is high, and investment is high. This process continues as long as economic conditions are favorable for expansion. Second stage is peak. The economy then reaches a saturation point or peak, which is the second stage of the business cycle. The maximum limit of growth is attained. The economic indicators do not grow further and are at their highest. Prices are at their peak. This stage marks the reversal point in the trend of economic growth. Consumers tend to restructure their budgets at this point. Then, after peak is recession. The recession is the stage that follows the peak phase. The demand for goods and services starts declining rapidly and steadily in this phase. Producers do not notice the decrease in demand instantly and go on producing, which create a saturation of excess supply in the market. Prices tend to fall. All positive economic indicators such as income, output, wages, and many more consequently start to fall. Number four, depression. there is a commensurate rise in unemployment. The growth in the economy continues to decline, and at this falls below the steady growth line. The stage is called a depression. Number five is trough. So in this the depression stage, the economy's growth rate becomes negative. There is further decline until the prices of factors as well as the demand and supply of goods and services contract to reach their lowest point. The economy eventually reaches the trough. It is the negative saturation point for an economy. There is an extensive depletion of national income and expenditures. And the last stage is the recovery. So after the trough, the economy moves to the stage of recovery. So in this phase, there is a turnaround in the economy and it begins to recover from the negative growth rate. Demand starts to pick up due to low prices and consequently supply begins to increase. The population develops a positive attitudes towards investment and employment and production starts increasing. Employment begins to rise, and due to accumulated cash balances with the bankers, lending also shows positive signals. So, in this phase, depreciated capital is replaced, leading to new investment in the production process. Recovery continues until the economy returns to the steady growth level. What is a recession? So, recession is a term used to signify a slowdown in general economic activity. So, in macroeconomics, recessions are officially recognized after two consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth rates. Many countries still adhere to that basis. Okay, the basis is after two consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth rates. But the National Bureau of Economic Research looks at a variety of factors when deciding whether or not America is in recessions. So the institutions define the event as a significant decline in economic activity spread across the economy, lasting more than a few months, normally visible in productions, employment, real income, and other indicators, not only GDP growth. Indicators of a recession. Number one, gross domestic product. Real GDP indicates the total value generated by an economy through goods and services produced in a given time frame, adjusted for inflation. Negative real GDP indicates a sharp drop in productivity. Number two, real income. Real income is calculated by measuring personal income, adjusting it for inflation, and discounting social security measures such as welfare payments. A decline in real income reduces purchasing power. Number three, manufacturing. The health of the manufacturing sector, taking into account overall export imports and trade deficits or trade surplus with other countries, signifies the strength and self sufficiency of an economy. Number four, wholesale and retail. Both wholesale and retail sales adjusted for inflations are also measured to gauge the market performance of goods. Number five, employment. A high rate of unemployment is a lagging indicator. It typically confirms an economy's pivot into recession stage rather than predicting a recession in the future. Usually, unemployment rates nearing 6% of the total workforce are considered problematic. Does GDP indicate a recession? Gross domestic product is the total value of everything produced within a country's borders. When economists talk about the size of the economy, they are referring to GDP. GDP growth is often listed as the cause of a recession, but it's more a warning signal that a recession is already underway. The GDP is only reported after a quarter is over, so the recession would have probably already been underway for a couple months by the time the GDP turned negative. As UK economy fell into recession in 2023, things you should know. UK economy fell into recession in second half of 2023. Despite officially being in a recession, GDP did grow by 0.1% for the whole of 2023. United Kingdom GDP growth rate. The services sector is the most important and account for 79% of United Kingdom's GDP. The biggest segment within services, government, education, and health, 19% of total GDP, real estate, 12%, professional, scientific, and technical activities, and administrative and support services, 12%. Wholesale and retail trade, 11%, and financial insurance, 8%. Industry accounts for 21% of the GDP, and the largest segment within these sectors are manufacturing, 10% of total GDP, and construction, 6%. The agriculture sector accounts for only 1% of GDP. Compositions of the GDP on the expenditure side: household consumption, 65%, government expenditures, 20%, and gross fixed capital formation, 17%. Exports of goods and services account for 28% of GDP, while imports account for 30%, subtracting 2% from GDP. This is a UK GDP growth from January 2021 to January 2024. So in 2023 first quarter, UK had 0.2% GDP growth. Second quarter, 0%. Third quarter, negative 0.1%. Fourth quarter, 0.3%. Considering full 2023, the GDP in the UK edged up to 0.1%. United Kingdom GDP growth. The British economy contracted 0.3% on quarter in quarter 4 2023, following a 0.1% decline in quarter 3 and worse than market forecast of a 0.1% fall, preliminary estimates showed. The economy entered recession amid a broad-based decline in output, namely in services, negative 0.2%, the same as in quarter 3. Particularly wholesale and retail trade, negative 0.6%, industrial production, negative 1% versus 0.1%. Mostly manufacture of machinery and equipment, negative 7%, and constructions, negative 1.3% versus 0.1%. On the expenditure side, there was a fall in exports, negative 2.9% versus negative 0.8%, imports, negative 0.8% versus negative 1.8%. Household spending, negative 0.1% versus negative 0.9%. particularly lower spending on recreation and culture, miscellaneous goods and services, and transport and government consumptions, negative 0.3% versus 1.1%, namely lower activity in education and health. Those falls were partially offset by an increase in gross capital formation 1.4% versus negative 1.4%, mostly other buildings and structures. Considering full 2023, the GDP in the UK edged up 0.1%. All the main sector fell on the quarter, with manufacturing, constructions, and wholesale being the biggest drags on growth, partially offset by increase in hotels and rentals of vehicles and machinery. Director of Economics Liz McCone said in a statement.